Nobody promised you an easy ride. Yet, whenever life hits hard, that automatic thought shows up. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. As if there were some cosmic AGR department tracking behavior and handing out protection from problems. There isn't. Life doesn't run on a reward algorithm. You can do everything right, be decent, responsible, disciplined, and still lose a job, your health, a relationship, or your footing. It's not punishment. It's not a moral test either. It's just life doing what it does, with no merit spreadsheet involved. Part of the shock comes from how many people were raised. Compared with previous generations, there was more comfort, more stability, more protection. Grandparents dealt with wars, shortage, political chaos. Parents faced economic turbulence and uncertainty. A lot of people growing up later were told that if they studied hard, behaved well, paid their bills, things would naturally fall into place. Nice story, no guarantee. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, saw something brutal up close. Good people suffer just as much as anyone else. Character doesn't grant immunity from tragedy. Hardship doesn't scream resumes. And here's where it gets uncomfortable for many. The biggest hit often isn't the problem itself. It's the shattered expectation that it shouldn't exist. The idea that life somehow owed you smooth sailing. It didn't. It never did. Nobody signed a contract promising a romantic comedy storyline. Sometimes life is messy, unfair, chaotic. And when that "why me" reaction shows up, the answer usually isn't philosophical or poetic. Why would you be the exception? Believing you deserved permanent ease weighs more than the actual setback. It keeps people stuck in outrage mode while life keeps moving without asking permission. Tough phases aren't rare detours, they are part of the package. Once that sinks in, less energy goes into pointless resistance and more goes into what actually matters, deciding what comes next after the hit. There's a strange upside here too. If you weren't entitled to constant ease, you also don't have to earn your right to recover, rebuild, or keep going. Survival doesn't require moral approval. Sometimes what drags things out isn't pain itself. It's the attachment to the dramatic story built around it. Now comes a subtler trap, and a more dangerous one. It's not the suffering itself. It's when it stops being a phase and turns into identity. Some people end up treating every setback like material for a dramatic autobiography, complete with vivid details and an air of "my story needs recognition." Everyone has a complicated past. That's not the issue. The real question is, when did pain start working like a credential? Since when does struggle automatically signal depth? Part of that comes from Nietzsche's famous line, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." Many people ran with that as justification to glorify any trauma, as if suffering automatically produced growth. It doesn't always. Some hits just hurt. Pop culture keeps feeding this area. Heroes almost always come with tragic backstories. Loss, rejection, catastrophe. It's presented as the fuel for becoming interesting. Consume enough of that and it's easy to start believing pain adds status. Then something happens. Instead of wanting out of the difficult situation as soon as possible, the person starts treating it like a defining chapter. Leaving the struggle behind begins to feel like losing part of who they are. But suffering isn't a badge. It's not proof of depth. Often it's simply an unpleasant stretch that needs to be handled or endured. No performance required. No epic narrative needed. There's a side effect too. When identity gets tied to pain, improvement can feel threatening. If things genuinely get better, the dramatic storyline disappears, and with it, the sense of distinction that came from it. Some people cling to the drama rather than face ordinary life again. Old stories keep getting retold because they became the main source of identity. Hardship wasn't meant to become permanent decoration. It's more like dental work, sometimes necessary, rarely pleasant. But nobody wants to live in the dentist's chair or build a personality around it. It happened, you dealt with it, you keep going. That's enough. Getting through something tough doesn't turn anyone into an epic hero. It just means they kept moving despite the setback. Honestly, that already counts for a lot. Now, alright, the problem showed up. No warning, no appointment scheduled. And usually there are three classic reactions: face it, freeze, or run from it. Guess which one became the modern specialty? Avoidance, just packaged in a much more polished way. People don't literally run away anymore. Now it's escape while sitting still, endless streaming, compulsive scrolling, socially accepted drinking, overworking disguised as ambition, gym obsession, chaotic relationships use it as distraction, and the phone always there, ready to numb any uncomfortable silence. The tricky part is that most people don't even notice they are avoiding anything. They call it unwinding, taking a break, or self-care. Sometimes it really is, but often it's just postponing what they don't want to face. There is a predictable pattern. Emotional discomfort shows up, the mind grabs whatever gives fast relief. Short-term relief teaches the brain to keep avoiding. Meanwhile, the unresolved issue stays in the background, quietly building weight, like ignoring a small leak in the ceiling. At first it's just a stain, later it's a full renovation. A strained relationship that could have been an awkward conversation becomes months of resentment. A work issue that needed a quick adjustment turns into burnout or an exit. Mild anxiety left unattended becomes a constant baseline. The logic isn't complicated. Avoidance today usually increases the cost tomorrow. And deep down, most people know this. That lingering sense of something unfinished rarely comes out of nowhere. The mind keeps track of open loops. While avoidance continues, the problem stays too, just less visible, not smaller. Eventually, the energy required to keep escaping runs out. At that point, facing it actually takes less effort than maintaining the escape routine. Recognizing that doesn't eliminate pain, it just prevents it from growing unnecessarily, and that alone changes a lot. Here's an idea that tends to split reactions. Some people find it freeing, others get irritated. Usually it depends on how attached someone is to their own narrative. The idea is simple. Your pain isn't rare. It feels unique because it's happening inside your own skin. It's intense, personal, immediate. But zoom out a bit and you will see billions of people have gone through very similar versions of it, across different eras, cultures, and circumstances. People have lost families to war, health to disease, stability to economic collapse, dignity to political oppression. Right now, there are workers enduring brutal conditions, teenagers overwhelmed by pressure, adults dealing with quiet losses nobody notices. The context changes, but the core experience repeats. There is a modern tendency to treat every personal struggle as something exceptional, almost artistic. Social media reinforces that constantly. Personal narrative, public validation, ongoing recognition. It can look like depth, but often it's just inflated individualism. When someone believes no one understands, isolation follows almost automatically. and isolation during tough periods often weighs heavier than the problem itself. It removes the very thing that helps most: shared experience and perspective. Stoic philosophers talked about this long ago. Marcus Aurelius had enormous power as Roman emperor. Epictetus lived as a slave. Completely opposite realities, similar conclusions. Hardship is part of being human, and the main control anyone has is over their response. Money, status, visibility, none of it grants exemption from that. And there's something encouraging hidden here. If suffering follows recognizable patterns, so do ways of dealing with it. You don't have to invent a brand new solution for every difficulty. History, psychology, philosophy, and collective experience already mapped many paths. Putting pain into perspective doesn't shrink in. It just prevents the kind of dramatic isolation that turns struggle into permanent identity. At the end of the day, nobody is lone protagonist of a grand tragedy. Everyone is part of a messy human experience where people are simply trying to handle their own challenges as best as they can. And realizing that often connects people more than it separates them. There is something people aren't really prepared for. Life's timing almost never matches your plans. You organize, work hard, try to do things the right way, and just when it seems like everything might finally click, something knocks the rhythm off. Promotion stalls because a crisis shows up. Health issues hit right when life was starting to feel lighter. A relationship falls apart exactly when stability mattered the most. The reaction is almost automatic. Why now? But life doesn't coordinate with personal schedules. It doesn't check your goals, deadlines, or 5-year plan before shifting direction. The sense of total control feels comforting, yet it's almost a mental strategy to keep anxiety manageable. People love plans, calendars, structured goals because they create a feeling of predictability. Reality tends to behave more like improvisation than a scripted performance. Interruptions happen, context changes, new variables appear without warning. That's where the right moment myth sneaks in. The idea that someday everything will align. Clear mind, stable finances, perfect environment, energy to spare. And then action will feel easy. That alignment almost never fully arrives. Camus illustrated this through the myth of Sisyphus. The task continues, the rock rolls back, movement goes on anyway. Life doesn't wait for a perfectly resolved chapter before introducing the next one. Waiting for ideal conditions often stretches the discomfort longer than necessary. Real life isn't divided into neat acts with tidy resolutions. It's more like continuous improvisation where adjustments happens in real time. Sometimes the most effective move is acting with whatever tools are available now, imperfect tools included. Postponing tends to add interest, less energy later, more accumulation, heavier emotional load. And there's a paradox here. When the need to control every variable softens, things often flow a bit better. Not because problems vanish, but because resistance drops. Timing won't be perfect, but the present, messy as it may be, is still the only place where change can actually begin. To wrap this up, here's an idea that clashes with everything people hear about relentless effort. There are moments when pushing harder makes things worse. That's not an excuse to quit. It's about recognizing when force is adding friction. There is a familiar paradox. Try desperately to fall asleep, you stay awake. Try to erase something from your mind, they show up even more. Try to force clarity on a complicated issue, your thinking locks up. The mind doesn't perform well under constant internal pressure. This isn't just philosophical talk. Psychology and even basic physical principles show that excessive force tends to generate opposing resistance. Sometimes the struggle itself becomes the obstacle. Eastern philosophy has long described a form of action without unnecessary strain. It doesn't mean passivity. It means noticing when anxious interference disrupts natural processes. Water offers a simple metaphor. It doesn't attack obstacles head on. It flows, adjusts, persists over time until space opens. During stressful phases, people often do the opposite, trying to solve everything through intensity alone. That usually leads to exhaustion without real progress. Sleep research shows a similar dynamic. When people stop obsessing over trying to sleep and accept being awake for a while, sleep often comes more easily. The tension around the solution was the main blocker. Applied broadly, some problems don't need fixing in the immediate sense. They need to be lived through. Grief isn't solved, it's processed over time. Uncertainty doesn't disappear. You learn to function alongside it. Fear fades more naturally when it's not constantly fought. Modern culture pushes quick fixes. If there's a problem, there should be an app, a hack, an update. Humans aren't software waiting for a patch. Sometimes the system reorganizes better with less interference. Not every difficult phase calls for complex strategies, endless content, or heroic effort. Sometimes it calls for simple presence, acknowledging the situation, continuing forward, allowing time to do part of the work. And something interesting often happens when the internal struggle eases. Clarity returns gradually. Ideas surface with less strain, not because of sudden enlightenment, just because anxiety stopped blocking your natural capacity to think. Stopping the fight doesn't solve anything, but it often creates the space where real solutions can finally emerge. That's it for today. If this video gave you something to think about, drop a like and subscribe. It helps more than you think. And if you stick around, there is plenty more coming. See you in the next one.